You really do meme us for it, but rightly so. Seriously, today though, these are things that changed everything. We're going to explore the history of those lore reveals that changed all, that forced us to zoom out and realize just how grimdark the Warcraft universe really is, and how darn small we actually are. Especially if you've picked up the game maybe in the last 8 years, I think you're going to learn a fair deal about how that experience has changed. Let's go. Back in Warcraft 3, Arthas fought the Faceless Ones under Icecrown. But there was no real in-game explanation for them, just a single line in a manual that referenced old gods. That's all the old gods were in Warcraft 3. I mean, even when we got to the Barrens and killed the Silithid, they were just another mob to grind. Really, it wasn't until patch 9.1 that the old gods changed the lore forever. Classic was built on the bones of the RTS games, so the Eastern Kingdoms and Northern Kalimdor, between Warcraft 1, 2, and 3, had loads of lore. There were no huge revelations for Orgrimmar or Anderhall, but everywhere south of the Barrens was a blank canvas, and the cradle for all old god lore. After meeting Cthulhu, we were promised more old gods, and suddenly Arthas didn't seem like the biggest threat on Azeroth. Instead, we were discovering through Uldaman, Ungoro, and Silithis that the Titans, who we still didn't know much about whatsoever, had imprisoned the old gods thousands of years ago, and that those old gods were in fact underneath Azeroth and about to break free. Next, it was Yogg, then it was Y'Sharj, and finally N'Zoth. Expansions worth of lore spawning from the gates of Anchorage, and all of that came from a mob in Warcraft 3 and a reference in that game's manual. And you can manually go to http://www.patreon.com/Bellular/join. And funnily enough, if you do that, you'll get access to our podcasts. I mean, I just recorded 2 of them with Matt. We've got lore walking episodes on the way, 2 general chats, as well as our lovely physical loot. And, things like this really sexy pin, plus early access to stuff like this. And if not, then hey, I hope you enjoyed that incredible segue. I manually entered it on my keyboard earlier. TBC introduced the Draenei, who arguably changed everything just by turning up. Their crazy space lore really did that. They had dimensional ships opening up the possibility of traveling the universe. That was mind-blowing for the Warcraft setting at the time. Their Eridar origins gave us a whole new perspective on Sargeras and really quite changed the lore. But perhaps most important of all, they gave us the Naru, the big light creatures who fought not just against the Legion, but also the Void, and who themselves could even enter a Void state. Suddenly, we looked up into the night sky and wondered just what the hell was out there. It really made things big. And speaking of Void, the TBC introduced the Ethereals, whose home world was consumed by the Void Lord Dimensius. So now those old gods we had just met actually had bosses, and yeah, they were kind of terrifying. Yes, this changed everything that we thought of Warcraft's cosmos, increasing the scope far beyond Warcraft 2's expansion. Patch 7.3 would in fact bring these Ethereals back, and I would not be surprised if we hear some more from them soon. After the success of Anchorage, Outland, and Northrend, it seemed like a true peace was possible between the factions. And then Garrosh became war chief, and everything changed. We first met Garrosh in Nagrand. He was the promise of an uncorrupted Orcish race, and out of respect for Grom, Thrall positioned him as successor to the mantle of War Chief. Garrosh was at the First Horde Council, deciding the campaign in Northrend. And whilst there was a range of opinions, Garrosh believed that the Horde should just conquer the Alliance, and then move on to Arthas. Then, when Bran announced Yogg-Saron's return, Garrosh and Varian, in fact, came to blows in Dalaran. This fiery relationship between Garrosh and Varian reflected the tensions between the factions, and that's a tension that really had exploded when Putris betrayed the Horde and attacked at the Wrathgate. Even as a Horde rebel, it made the peace impossible. When Varian launched a counter-invasion of Undercity, he declared war on Thrall. This, in fact, was the first official war between the two factions as we would know them as players. It quickly ended, of course, but it set the tone for the lore going forward. This story would play out until Garrosh became war chief in Cataclysm, bombed Theramore, destroyed the Vale, went on trial, and kick-started the Iron Horde. All things that absolutely nobody saw coming all the way back in the Burning Crusades Nagrand. I think a great example of a character starting off slow and small and in fact growing naturally in the game in a way that respected old lore, created new lore, and was just quite satisfying. Beyond the factions, or even the Scourge, Wrath was huge for the lore. When we saw the Titan Forged, the similarities were clear. They were ancestors of the gnomes and the dwarves, something that had been suspected since vanilla, but properly was now confirmed. But we had no idea the Vrykul were humanity's ancestor. This was huge, defining humanity's earliest history. But a disturbing discovery underpinned it. We evolved because of the curse of flesh, meaning the old gods personally corrupted us. But the real slap in the face came from Ulduar. The 4 Titan Watchers, Mimiron, our first Mechanome encounter, Freya, who is still important today, Thorim, who saw some action in Legion, and finally Hodir, who is in fact speculated to be the original Great Father Winter. It was the next grand step in Titan lore, but it had one final, paradigm-shifting lore reveal, one we are still questioning today. Algalon the Observer. Ulduar had a hard mode in the Celestial Observatory. Inside was a giant made of stars, a Constellar, a direct servant of the Titans. He had just traveled to Azeroth and undertook a diagnostic of the planet's corruption, and the results were grim. Azeroth was infested beyond redemption. He then initiated the Re-Origination Protocol, which would wipe out the old gods and all life on Azeroth. We suddenly realized just how small we were in the grand scheme of things. Motes of dust to be offhandedly destroyed by the uncaring Titans. So we put the beat down on Algalon. If he despawned, he sent a code Omega to Uldum, where we would later explore in Cataclysm. If defeated, however, he had a stark realization about Azeroth, one that really began something that would be key. If you look at the lore right now, Azeroth in many ways is framed as the center of a great cycle, and that's where we did something different. We changed Algalon in a way he had never seen. Algalon had seen worlds bathed in the Maker's flames, killing millions, and felt nothing. Yet our tenacity moved him. We actually made him feel for the first time. He realized that was our imperfection, our curse of flesh, and how cosmically strange we are, like using all the cosmic forces together to win a battle. We will prevail where the Titans' perfect creations could not. Space is big, and the sheer scale of Algalon's experience blew the lid on what we thought. And it's that bit where we really begin to realize something that is extremely clear in the narrative now. That Azeroth is the chosen world, that we are the chosen people of the chosen planet, and that really, we are the center of the universe, we are the only ones left. We always knew Deathwing would have a bash at destroying Azeroth, and Cataclysm was well set up as a dragon expansion. Wrath of the Lich King had the Nexus, the Dragon Shrines, Wormrest, and of course, the origin of the dragons themselves through Galakrond and that story. So we had great context for the dragons going into Cataclysm, but it was also the expansion that caused dragons to disappear from the story. When Deathwing did make his return, Ysera had a vision of the Demon Soul, a powerful artifact created by Deathwing to control other aspects. She believed it was the only way to defeat Deathwing, but it was of course destroyed during the Second War. Of course, we could just hop into the Caverns of Time for some temporal thievery and bring the original Demon Soul to the present. This wasn't groundbreaking lore because we just put the Demon Soul right back in its original place after. But what then happened was major. Alexstrasza called a meeting of the Dragonflights when the two moons of Azeroth were in alignment. She, along with Nosdormu and Ysera, announced that the charge of the Dragonflights had ended, and that they no longer had the will or ability to defend Azeroth, that they had fulfilled their purpose. Which is a bit strange if their original purpose was to actually solve the problem of one of them going rogue and getting the Dragon Soul and Let's not think about that. After this meeting, the dragons disappeared from the lore for the next decade. Pretty much. They were still important, like Rathian splitting the timeline, or Chromie giving us new content and generally being one of the fan-favorite, very good characters to have around when you're bored. But dragons were a central part of the narrative. I mean, it's a fantasy setting and it's dragons, come on. At any time a new threat would emerge, we would ask, what are the dragons going to do about it? What do they think about this? Well, this time we couldn't ask any more, and it was down to us. And I actually think that, once more, this is the mantle passing. It used to be we thought that Azeroth was a planet and the dragons were its protectors. Well, we then began to realize that Azeroth was really quite special, and that we were quite special. And then the dragons were no longer the protectors, we were. This is all a ratcheting up of the importance of my character and your guild as canonical characters within the Warcraft setting. And it really is, well, a path. A path that, of course, leads us to the way the lore is right now, where you and I are both the Mawwalker. Chronicle, as much as it was about codifying the last 18 years of lore, well, it threw out more questions than answers, packed with new lore confirming speculated events and dropping a massive revelation: the cosmology chart and creation. It put the whole universe into perspective. We discovered the clash between light and void, and from the way the forces were set up in opposition, we suddenly realized there was a war in heaven way bigger than anything we could have imagined. One that almost evoked the fantastical aspects of Warhammer 40k's deep, deep, deep past and the likes of the Catan. Incredible stuff. We had helped the Naru and the Titan Keepers, thinking that they were the pinnacle of the conflict, but now we understood that they were just foot soldiers in a war that we now are marching into. Thinking about it another way, Chronicle was Chris Metzen's epitaph, the entire collection of his lore. Steve Denuser then rose to lead the narrative of Warcraft, setting us off on a new arc exploring the cosmos. I mean, we're being set up for some big exploration with the Brokers dimension hopping and Elune kind of being a nomadic space goddess. So who knows where we're going to go next? I think one of the most visceral examples of a huge shift in lore direction was the Battle of the Broken Shore. Because looking back, it was the moment in-game that truly changed everything. For the Alliance, Varian died. This put Anduin in control of the Alliance. He struggled with that responsibility throughout Legion, but came into his own in Battle for Azeroth and is now truly a main character in the lore. Very different from the, well, low polygon looking boy that we saw back in the games past. Similarly, Gen Greymane was given more screen time, sort of set there as that, well, fiery uncle character to balance out Anduin's pacifism. However, the true lore-shattering stuff that happened was on the Horde side, and it directly leads into Shadowlands. And Shadowlands truly did change the Warcraft universe in a way that can never be put back into the box. Vol'jin was stabbed with a poisoned spear, and as he lay dying on the war chief's throne, Muzala, an ancient spirit of death, an ancient Loa, whispered into his ear to make Sylvanas the new war chief. We didn't know who Sylvanas was working for. There was even a chance she was still a Horde loyalist, or even in league with N'Zoth. It was a deeply mysterious time as we chart through Sylvanas' story. At one point at the beginning, people truly thought, wow, Sylvanas, there's someone I could follow. Just looking at how she presented herself following Vol'jin's death. But we now know that that was just Blizzard cinematography, Blizzard framing, and Blizzard music, making us feel a way that is, well, I guess exactly what Sylvanas wanted. Rather meta way of telling the story, really. And of course, she would have the whole future of the setting balanced on a knife's edge. Even when the Fourth War truly began, we had no idea that the whole Fourth War was just to feed souls into the Maw. Imagine looking at the Battle for Azeroth cinematic, seeing Alliance versus Horde clash in a gorgeous cinematic that showed actual boots in the ground fighting, that showed the fantastical elements of Warcraft with Void and Sylvanas and Light with Anduin. We thought that was an old school fantasy battle, the true awesome stuff that, you think about Warcraft 3, you think about classic Warcraft, and you think of that BFA cinematic. Little did we know that it was all just fuel for Zovaal. And when we think back to it, all of that was only possible with the death of Vol'jin. That does make you wonder. How much did the Dreadlords pay that one Felguard guy that stabbed him? I mean, shit, he must have got a hell of a performance bonus after that one, literally allowing BFA and Shadowlands to happen. So I guess, good on you, lucky stabbing Fel dude. You certainly sent the lore in a direction. Legion's finale was one of the most lore-defining moments we have ever experienced, and right now you and I still don't know the full magnitude. We went to Argus itself, to the burning throne of the Legion. We freed Aenar, defeated Agrimar and Argus, and brought the Titans to the seat of the Pantheon, their old HQ. Then they captured the biggest bad the setting has ever had, Sargeras. In Legion, it was fair to say this changes everything for what happened with Sargeras. But now our new understanding makes us have to say that again. The time this was huge, because every threat that we had faced over the past 20 years was in some way connected to Sargeras. From the first demon-worshipping orcs to the War of the Ancients sundering the planet, every zone, dungeon, and raid in a way could filter back to the fall of Sargeras. Even the old god lore, which represented the other big threat in the setting, was directly tangled up with Sargeras. Now, he's gone. The group we had most feared, the Burning Legion, is gone. And the lore of the game will never be the same. And with the information of Shadowlands, well, the death of Argus meant something to Zovaal's plan. That is essentially confirmed. And as for Sargeras himself, he may never be the same, for his belt clearly hails from the Shadowlands. What are the implications of that? But that wasn't the only long-time villain we would lose in a short time period, and we're still questioning just how much has changed because of this one. Battle for Azeroth truly was the expansion of putting nails in coffins, putting old lore sort of in the grave where it could just stay for a bit. None more so than the Black Empires. Like the Legion, defeating N'Zoth was the final blow in a war with the old gods that began in patch 1.9. N'Zoth had been lurking in the background for a long time and had already made a move to destroy Azeroth during the Cataclysm, because it was ultimately N'Zoth who corrupted and controlled Deathwing. But then, N'Zoth was gone. We killed him with a big laser beam. And we're in this strange situation where we know we haven't won the war against the Void, but that chapter in the game's history with old gods being our big villains, it's likely over. Blizzard are bringing us on a new arc, one that will travel the cosmos and meddle with powers beyond our imagination. To do that, they've had to make changes, or recontextualize the story a bit, and that process began in the Shadowlands. Began in earnest in the Shadowlands, anyway. I'll highlight two huge revelations. First, the enemy infiltration document. For being such a small part of the actual game, I mean, it's just a few paragraphs of text, it changed our entire perspective on everything. Literally everything. It is the most this changes everything of all of the this changes everythings. It told us that Sire Denathrius created we learned that he created the Nathrezim, and it was pretty obvious back then, but it then tells us that they've been orchestrating a millennia-long plan to understand each of the cosmic forces so that they could infiltrate and destroy them from the inside by orchestrating a vast cosmic war. I mean, there you go. Wasn't Sargeras behind anything or everything, was it? No, it was them. They discovered that order is built like a house of cards. Take one little bit away and the whole thing just crumbles to pieces. They discovered that disorder was an immensely powerful force, but that it was disorder and it had no way of directing itself. So they hatched a plan to turn the Titan Sargeras, being of order, into the Patriarch of Disorder, bringing order to chaos. And that was all the Nathrezim's plan. And obviously, whenever chaos is given order, it can be brought to bear, and bam, a universe full of life is wiped out. Assuming the Nathrezim were working for the Jailer, and, well, we know they are, this document puts Zovaal as point zero in all of the cosmic strife, not Sargeras. So we kind of spent many years thinking Sargeras was the big dude, the big space Satan. And actually, I say space Satan in a pretty intentional sense, because in a way, Zovaal very much is a fallen angel, and think about actual, Satan, right? It's quite interesting that they replaced the Sargeras one with a new guy in one expansion just to kill that new guy at the end of that one expansion, but hey, here we are, questioning the lores for another video, one that you've probably already seen. So yeah, they have meant that that's all established way before the Legion, and this is a strife that has pretty much underpinned the entire Warcraft narrative. Now it's different. Finally, I'll use Elune to illustrate a point. We recently discovered that Elune is the Winter Queen's sister. Then, collecting evidence from Xal'atath, calling her an upstart goddess, Elune seems to have aspected Night Warriors on many other planets, right? And this has got us thinking that Elune is some sort of nomadic goddess, traveling the universe, helping life flourish. It was a little jarring to put Elune in context at all, if I'm honest, but that's the world we live in now. We've met the enigmatic Titans, the Prime Naru, and the gods of death. Like the Void Lords or the Eternal Ones, the next big unknowns seem like mysteries we'll begin answering soon. Think about that. Then think about the player's first steps out of Northshire, or the Valley of Trials back in 2004. Think about where we are today. World of Warcraft is different. Everything has changed. That's the thumbnail text. We did a video about the thumbnail text. Cool. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video about the thumbnail text, and if you'd like to support us a bit more, you can check out the Patreon. We've got a bunch of exclusive content over there, as well as early access, and some sweet loot. I mean, here's 2 pins that the teams have made, right? This awesome looking staff, this a really cool looking magical Labrum book, dude. It's pretty sweet what those artists do, eh? Alright, that's it for me. Take care, have a wonderful day, see you later.